Heim and Carson Hocevar wreck each other during the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Phoenix, and Tony Stewart calls out the Truck Series after an abysmal performance at Phoenix. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're ahead by starting to talk about the Phoenix March Cup Series race, as their title sponsor has been revealed, and it's going to be called the Shriners Children 500. Pretty good sponsorship, if you ask me. Really cool to see the Shriners Children will be sponsoring the NASCAR Cup Series race in March at Phoenix. We've seen a lot of different sponsorships for the spring March race at Phoenix. Nonetheless, Shriners Children will be the sponsor for the event. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Carson Hocevar. As Carson Hocevar is your 2023 Cars Late Model Stock Tour champion. Carson Hocevar has been doing a really good job in the Cars Late Model Tour. He has made a couple starts, I think, in the Truck Series, and has done a pretty good job there as well. And he's been making a lot of rounds, course drives for Junior Motorsports in the Cars Late Model Tour. We'll see where his future goes in 2024. Nonetheless, and great and amazing to see him go out and win the Cars Late Model Stock Tour championship. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Richard Childress. As there was a report by Adam Stern, I believe it was on Friday afternoon, that Richard Childress is worth $250 million from a laundry list of owned businesses, like a venture with Bill Gates, among a couple other major ventures as well. It doesn't surprise or shock me that Richard Childress has a lot of money. Now, one thing I wish Richard Childress would do is invest more into making his organization faster, because his organization has kind of struggled over the course of the last few years. Joe Cowboys just scored 3 wins this year in 2023, and also we've seen the Xfinity Series program do much better. But it is cool to see Richard Childress have a lot of success there and get it done with a ton of money. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Shan Henani. As Shan Henani has won the 2023 ARCA West Series Championship. Congratulations to Shan Henani on winning the championship. Obviously, I've had my opinions on Shan Henani. I think Shan Henani's done a lot of kind of not great things out on the racetrack, but it is cool to see someone go out and win a championship for the first time. It was very easy to win that championship, though, considering he drives for Venturini Motorsports. Nonetheless, huge and congratulations to him on being your 2023 ARCA champion. It wasn't that hard to get it done, but he is your 2023 ARCA West Series champion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Rookie of the Year honors. As I'm going to talk about all 3 drivers who have won the Rookie of the Year honors. First, for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, Nick Sanchez is your 2023 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series Rookie of the Year. While Nick Sanchez did not score a win this year, he did end up nearly making it to the Championship 4. It was a really good year for him. He had a chance to win quite a few races. Congratulations to him on winning the Rookie of the Year honors for the Truck Series. Next, Sammy Smith. Sammy Smith is your 2023 NASCAR Xfinity Series Rookie of the Year. Congratulations to Sammy Smith on that. Obviously being the only rookie, I think, that made the playoffs this year. He was able to score a victory at Phoenix and did show a lot of pace and a lot of speed. Had a chance to make it to the Championship 4. A great honor for him. And once again, congratulations to him on being your 2023 NASCAR Xfinity Series Rookie of the Year. And finally, for the Cup Series, it is Tai Gibbs. Tai Gibbs has won the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series Rookie of the Year honors. Tai Gibbs, no surprise and shock. Obviously, the other rookies that were up against him were not going to be the major competition, because the only other rookie contender, Noah Gragson, didn't even finish the whole entire year. So congratulations to all 3 of those drivers on being your Rookie of the Years for the respective series. I think the Cup Rookie of the Year class next year is going to be really strong. And nonetheless, congratulations to Joe drivers on winning the Rookie of the Year honors. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. While the NASCAR Cup Series Championship race was going on, you had the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. And not a surprise or shock, Max Verstappen was able to win the 2023 Sao Paulo Grand Prix. But it was a much crazier race than I think a lot of us were expecting it to be. Right as the green flag dropped, before the green flag even dropped, Charles Leclerc's car crashed during the formation lap. And then you had a couple cars that were taken out because of that, including Alex Albon. I think a few others got collected in that as well. And then, of course, you had a few other wrecks that ended up taking place throughout the event, where only 15 cars ended up finishing. Lando Norris was trying to run down Max Verstappen near the end of the race, but he didn't have anything for him. And Max Verstappen, like I said, picked up his 17th win of 2023 and his 52nd career Formula One victory. This is one of the most legendary years in Formula One history. I mean, Max has more points than second place and almost the rest of the teams combined at this point. It's been a dominant dominant year for Max Verstappen. It's been an incredible year for him. Congratulations to him on winning the event. I think he's going to win the last 2 races because I think there's only 2 races left in the Formula 1 season this year before we do go in the off season. But congratulations to Verstappen on once again winning the 2023 Sao Paulo Grand Prix, a well-deserved victory. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Wally Rogers. As Wally Rogers announced, I think it was on Saturday morning, that he will be retiring as a crew chief. Wally Rogers has been the crew chief for the 45 truck for Lawless Allen for the last 2 years, and he's been in the NASCAR industry, I think, for about 19 or 20 years. If I'm not mistaken, he was a crew chief for Tony Stewart in the Xfinity Series back in 2005 when Tony Stewart drove the 33 car with Kevin Harvick Incorporated. So he's been around for a very, very long time and been around the block for a long time. Congratulations to Wally Rogers on a very successful career in NASCAR. Wishing the best luck going forward. He still plans to be around in NASCAR over the course of time. Nonetheless, congratulations to Wally Rogers on a pretty solid and a pretty good career in NASCAR. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. Now tonight or tomorrow when you're watching this video, Kevin Harvick's career officially came to an end earlier today. And after the race concluded, Kevin Harvick did some toast and some hosting and basically reflected on his final NASCAR race and of course his career. And you could tell by the interviews that he was getting extremely emotional after the race. Kevin Harvick, in my opinion, is one of the greatest NASCAR drivers to ever race in this sport. 60 career victories. And he did something really cool by getting his 21st top 10 finish in a row, which is the most for any track in NASCAR at any given track in the history of the sport. Kevin Harvick, of course, will transition to working in the Fox Sports booth, but I think a lot of fans, including myself, are going to remember Kevin Harvick for all he's accomplished. I think he's someone that should be remembered for many years to come, and he deserves a lot of respect for everything he was able to do in this sport. So massive and huge congratulations to him on being basically an incredible career. And he got to finish 7th to lead laps in his final race. It was an incredible career. It's an incredible honor. And Kevin Harvick, in my opinion, is a first ballot Hall of Famer. But honest and sincere congratulations to Kevin Harvick on being basically a great career, and wishing him best of luck as he goes and transitions to the Fox Sports booth. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Blaney. Now, Ryan Blaney is your 2023 NASCAR Cup Series champion, and a lot of drivers had reactions to him winning the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series championship, and a lot of them were really happy. First, Bubba Wallace was being interviewed by Francis, kind of talking about him finishing 10th for the race. Wasn't happy they got into Brad Keselowski, but Bubba Wallace was very, very happy to see Ryan Blaney win the championship. Obviously, Ryan Blaney and Bubba Wallace have been really good friends for a very, very long time, and I think it's a very emotional day for Bubba Wallace because Bubba Wallace has had a pretty good year in the Cup Series. I think seeing his best friend go out and win the championship means a lot to him, so that was really cool to see. Then he had Brad Keselowski, who basically, I think it was on his Twitter page, he went up to congratulate Ryan Blaney on winning the championship. Of course, Ryan Blaney is a former driver of Brad Keselowski Racing when that truck series team was around, so it was really cool to see him do that. And he also had Chase Elliott, who went up on the stage as well, who was really good friends of Ryan Blaney as well, go up on the stage. You had also, I believe, Dale Jr. congratulating on Twitter. You had Scott McLaughlin there congratulating. You had a lot of drivers. Even Kyle Larson and William Byron were showing a lot of respect in their post-race interviews as well. So nonetheless, a great career year for Ryan Blaney. Congratulations to him on winning the championship. And I think a lot of this garage has a ton of respect for him. They respect what Ryan Blaney's done, and a lot of people do like him. So nonetheless, a massive and huge congratulations to Ryan Blaney on winning the championship. I think it's a well-deserved and pretty classy from everyone to give him the respect he absolutely deserves. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brad Perez. Now, Brad Perez being interviewed, unfortunately, after his really bad wreck that took place in qualifying for the Xfinity Series race took place, where unfortunately he did fail to qualify because of that wreck. Brad Perez is being interviewed by Toby Christie. And Brad Perez says he at least has enough funding to run at least 3 races in NASCAR in 2024. This is really, really good to see. Obviously, he did not reveal where he's going to be racing for 2024, but he's currently working on that. Brad Perez has been working this sport for many, many years, and I have a lot of respect for this guy because he puts the work into it. Not only as a race car driver, but he works as sometimes like a mechanic. He works sometimes carrying tires out for teams. He's helped basically DGM Racing over the years, Alpha Prime Racing over the years. He does it all and has also done some work as spotting for other organizations and drivers as well. It's really cool to see Brad Perez having the opportunity to get the race. He's had some decent runs as well. Unfortunately, not everything has gone to plan that he was hoping for, but it has been a good year for him. I know that he's had some good runs. He deserves the opportunity chance and really hope he gets to run in more races next year in 2024, but at least it's good to see that he will get to run at least 3 races in the 2024 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about 3F Racing. Now, 3F Racing was interviewed, I believe it was from Jared Haas from Frontstretch.com. We'll talk about him here in a little bit. But according to Jared Haas has said, 3F Racing says that they're hoping to run at least 8 to 10 Cup Race Series races in 2024. 3F Racing had been wanting to run some NASCAR Cup Series races in 2023, and they have been planning to do that. Unfortunately, funding and sponsorship came into play and was a major reason why this team did not show up. Now, a lot of people are wondering how legitimate this team is. Well, they are a very legitimate team. They've actually been competing in the NASCAR Euro Series with Ryan Vargas, who works as kind of their development person in their organization. And Ryan Vargas has been running quite a few of the NASCAR Euro races where I think he's done a very solid and a really good job this year in those select races. So they're a pretty legitimate team. I'm not sure who they're going to have an alliance with next year in 2024. My speculation is it's probably going to be with Richard Childress Racing, since basically ECR Enders is probably what they're going to end up getting. Now, obviously, they're probably going to run the Daytona 500, and they're probably going to look for someone to get behind the wheel that could run. Maybe say get someone like a Matt DiBenedetto perhaps to drive for the team. I think that'd be really cool to see him run for a new organization. Maybe they get someone out of nowhere to bring into the team from like the NASCAR Euro Series. Who knows at this point, but it's really cool to see if 3F Racing is still looking to run. I hope they do get an opportunity, chance to run in the future. I think it's really cool to see, and hopefully we do see 3F Racing out on the racetrack in 2024, but it does sound like at this point that it is going to end up happening, that they're going to show up to the racetrack, and I have to say, hopefully they do show up, and I think if they do, I think they will be pretty solid and pretty successful, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rajah Caruth. As Rajah Caruth spoke on his first race with Hendrick Motorsports and also kind of talked about 2024. Now let's talk about the race Rajah Caruth had with Hendrick Motorsports. Rajah Caruth, obviously a lot of people were expecting Rajah, like myself, to run extremely good, but you have to remember Rajah Caruth is only, I believe, 20 years old or 21 years old, so you have to keep your expectations a little limited. I think Rajah actually did a very solid job last night. He ran top 15 and top 20 a majority race, and at times was attempting to get inside the top 10. I think he got, unfortunately, into the back of John Hunter Nemechek near the end of the race, but Rajah, in my opinion, did a pretty solid job. And Rajah is hoping to maybe make some more NASCAR Xfinity Series starts in the future for Hendrick Motorsports. Now, talking about 2024, obviously, of course, he's not returning to GMS Racing because GMS Racing's Truck Series program is unfortunately going to be shut down after last night, the Truck Series race, which we're going to talk about later in the episode. But what I will say this about Rajah Caruth, I think Rajah has done a really solid job in the Truck Series and has had a couple good races in the Xfinity Series as well. Now, where do I think Rajah Caruth ends up in 2024? Honestly, I don't really know at this point. But there are some options that are going to be available for him. You do have Spire Motorsports in the Truck Series, and some people have been speculating he could go there next year. The reason being is because they do have an alliance with KBM, and he's also driven for Spire Motorsports before. So I could definitely see Rajah Caruth definitely going to Spire Motorsports in the 2024 season. Another team he could go to is maybe Nice Motorsports, perhaps. Nice is definitely a major possibility for sure in the Truck Series, but also the Xfinity Series. He could go to Hendrick Motorsports full-time with that number 17 car. I think if they run full-time, that car will run a lot better. Or he could go to like Alpha Prime Racing next year. It is certainly possible. I think Rajah Caruth, though, definitely for sure deserves an opportunity and chance to race in NASCAR Xfinity Series moving up next year, but I think there's a good chance he goes to Trucks. My prediction right now is he goes either Nice Motorsports or Spire Motorsports in the Truck Series in 2024, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Nonetheless, a really good year for Rajah. He learned a lot. He's done some good things this year, and hopefully Rajah will have a good year in 2024, wherever he ends up racing. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch Motorsports. Now, Kyle Busch was being interviewed by the media on Saturday after the Truck Series race had concluded, and Kyle Busch reflected on Kyle Busch Motorsports and what they have accomplished in this sport, and basically got to talk about a little bit of the purchase as well from Spire Motorsports purchase. Obviously, Kyle Busch Motorsports is unfortunately shutting down. They're no longer going to be a thing. I think Kyle revealed that, on basically on SiriusXM, on Friday, that they were going to be shutting down a program on Friday. Kyle Busch Motorsports is one of the most successful organizations in NASCAR history, scoring over 100 wins in the Truck Series. Kyle Busch gained that 100th win at Pocono. They've won championships, and they've had a lot of really good drivers drive for their organization. Drivers have driven include Bubba Wallace. Christopher Bell's won the championship for KBM. William Byron, who had a great year with the team and nearly won the championship for KBM. They've had other drivers like Noah Gragson drive for this organization. Eric Jones, who won the championship for them in 2015. There's other guys like Christian Eckes who've driven this organization. Rafael Lessard comes to mind. A lot of great names and a lot of great talents have come through the ranks and driven for KBM. And I think it's going to be really sad to see Kyle Busch Motorsports shut down, because I think it would have been really cool to see his team continue. But Kyle Busch also does say that one of the big reasons is because of funding. And when he lost that funding from Toyota, I think that really played a role into the future of his organization. It is a shame to see Kyle Busch Motorsports no longer going to be a thing, but I think it's understandable why they made the decision to go ahead and shut their organization down. They've had a great career as an organization, and nonetheless, congratulations to them on an incredible career as a team. It's going to be sad to see them gone along with GMS Racing, but it's not a major shock and surprise that they are no longer going to be a thing, unfortunately. It sucks that they're gone, but it's not a major shock and surprise, unfortunately. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kobby Howard. As it was announced during the Truck Series broadcast by FrontStretch.com that Kobby Howard will not return to CR7 Motorsports in 2024. Kobby Howard had joined his organization for 2023, and unfortunately, Kobby Howard did not have the best results with CR7 Motorsports. But I want to say it's a shame for Kobby Howard, because in my opinion, he's had some good runs with this team. But I do think a major reason why we'll get to second is why he's not going to be back there. I think a big reason does come down to the lack of funding and sponsorship. I don't believe that Kobby Howard does bring a lot of funding. He does bring a little bit of funding, but he doesn't bring the biggest funding in the world. So where is Kobby Howard going to end up in 2024? Honestly, I really don't know at this point, because I really think his future is very uncertain right now. The fact he's not coming back to CR7 Motorsports is extremely concerning, and I don't know if he will have a ride next year in 2024. As for who could end up driving for this team in 2024, a lot of people are thinking it's going to be Grant Enfinger. Grant Enfinger has driven for CR7 Motorsports before, drove for them back in 2021. He kind of got put in a really bad deal where he's only going to run like half the race with ThorSport Racing and split, I think, the 98 truck with Christian Eckes that year. And he had to go over to CR7 Motorsports and drive for them, and he had some really good runs with the team. So a lot of people are linking that too. Also, Grant Enfinger, I do believe, has Champion Power Equipment as a sponsor, so that would be a huge reason why he could end up over there in 2024. We're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to who ends up driving for the team next year. It's a shame to see he's not going to be back there with Kobby Howard, but if Grant Enfinger is going over to CR7 Motorsports, it's going to be a downgrade for sure, but I think that they're going to get a lot of that GMS Racing equipment, so that definitely will help them for sure, but we'll see what happens in regards to next year. But unfortunately, Kobby Howard is not returning to the organization in 2024. Really tough and really unfortunate, but not really surprising or shocking, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about silly season. Now, there were a couple of very interesting silly season reports that came out from FrontStretch.com. First, Jack Wood was being interviewed after the Truck Series race after crashing out from the contact from, I believe it was Zane Smith, and Jack Wood is still working on his 2024 plans. Jack Wood did drive for Kyle Busch Motorsports in many races this year, but after a lot of lackluster results with KBM, I don't know where Jack Wood is going to end up in 2024. I do believe that Jack Wood does have some funding and sponsorship. Maybe he goes to Rev Racing full-time in a second truck for that team. It is certainly possible, but I think the future for Jack Wood's a little uncertain. I don't think he's going to be going to Spire Motorsports, though, in the 2024 season. Next, Jake Garcia says he's also still working on his 2024 plans. A few weeks ago, Jake Garcia confirmed that he will not be returning to Makina Hilgeman Racing for 2024. Jake Garcia's had some really good runs with the team this year in 2024, and I do believe that Jake Garcia deserves a chance and opportunity to run with a really good organization. I think if he goes to Spire, which I think is a team he could go to next year, I think he would be pretty solid and pretty competitive. Is he going to end up there? I don't know at this point, but I think he does have a chance to go to a pretty good team. And finally, Kaz Grala. Kaz Grala also says his plans are still up in the air, but he wants to return to Sam Hunt Racing next year. In my opinion, I think Kaz Grala has done a decent job with Sam Hunt Racing. He's gotten 6 or 7 top 10s. Obviously, Sam Hunt Racing is still a newer organization, is still working to get things up to speed and up to par really quickly. I think he does deserve a chance to run with a good team for sure. I'm talking about Kaz Grala. We'll see, though, if he ends up returning in the 2024 year. Nonetheless, all these drivers are working under 2024 plans, and things are still a little bit up in the air in regards to that. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2023 TV ratings. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern earlier today or yesterday when you're watching this, viewer, that the 2023 TV ratings have kind of come out. And according to Adam Stern, viewership for the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series season is down 5% heading into today with an average of 2.866 million viewers per event versus 3.031 million viewers last year. Again, not a major shock and a major surprise. A major reason for the ratings being down quite a bit this year is because Chase Elliott unfortunately was not at the racetrack at the beginning of the year after a skiing accident or snowboarding accident where he missed it quite a bit. And you had races that were down 15 to 20%. But also, the playoffs have been down in a pretty big way as well. I think the numbers they said were down 7 or 8% when it comes to the playoffs, which is not very good right now. And I think one of the biggest reasons is because a lot of people do tune out due to the playoffs. Again, you had Steve Phelps trying to basically defend the numbers, saying, we were down 15%, so it was still bad. But having your average viewership down 5% compared to last year is still not very good. Having only average of 2.86 million viewers, granted, there's a lot of the cable races, it is a big issue. Now, one thing I do think that could end up happening next year in 2024 that maybe will help with TV ratings is maybe they too put a lot more of these races on main NBC. I think you can find a way to negotiate that, and there have been more races on the main NBC network over the course of the last 2 years than we've seen in previous years. Again, this is a very important year. If your TV ratings are going to go down, that will hurt negotiations. We're going to talk about Fox here in just a little bit here in this episode, but I think it's not a great thing that TV ratings are down. It's disappointing to see for sure. But again, I'm not really shocked or surprised that TV ratings are down for this season. It doesn't surprise me or shock me, in my opinion. I expected it. I wasn't surprised about it. And again, not a major shock, surprise to see that the TV ratings at least were down for 2023. And I'm probably going to be worse because the championship race has been dropping a ton every single year. It did end up going, flat in 2022 compared to 2021. I think it will be a little down in 2023 compared to 2022, simply because the Hail Mound really helped that out quite a bit. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, Hailie Deegan, before the NASCAR Xfinity Series race took place, I think Brian Nolan from FrontStretch.com put out an image in a tweet showing that Hailie Deegan was in the pit box AM Racing getting a head start for 2024. Hailie Deegan's already announced that she will be headed to AM Racing in the 2024 season, and it's really good to see that she's already going over to get a little more focus for 2024, because like I said, she is moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in the 2024 season. Hailie Deegan has struggled in the Cup Truck Series the last 3 years. Let's be honest, she's only scored, I think, 4 or 5 career Truck Series top 10s, and she hasn't done as good there. But I will defend Hailie Deegan on one thing. She did have one NASCAR Xfinity Series race where she did run really, really good, where she ended up finishing 13th with SS Greenlight Racing. Now, that was within Stewart Haas Racing Alliance, but she still, in my opinion, did a pretty solid and a pretty good job in that race. Now, what are my expectations for Hailie Deegan next year with AM Racing? Honestly, I think my expectations are kind of a little interesting. I think she will be an outside contender for the playoffs, but it will only depend on how much support Ford gives. They did say earlier this past week that they will put more focus on their Truck Series programs than their Xfinity Series programs, but I do believe that you're going to see Ford try to give her the best opportunity and chance to be very, very competitive. I think Hailie Deegan does have talent. I think she'll score a couple top 10s next year. I don't think she scores top 5 and a couple top 10s. I think she will get a lot of top 15s. I think she'll contend for top 15 to top 20 in the standings. But I do think that she's not going to crash as much like she done in the NASCAR Truck Series. I think she will have a much better year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series than she's had in the Truck Series. Nonetheless, wishing her the best of luck, and it is good to see that Hailie Deegan is going down and learning and trying to see if she can do better. So we'll see what happens next year in 2024, but she, of course, was spotted and working on 2024 and being focused and being at AM Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the CW. As there was reported by Adam Stern on Friday late afternoon or early evening that according to him, the CW's parent company views the NASCAR Xfinity Series deal starting in 2025 as the crown jewel of the CW's growing sports portfolio. Obviously, it was announced a few months ago that the NASCAR Xfinity Series will be moving away from NBC and Fox and will be transitioning over to the CW starting in 2025. I think the deal goes from 2025 to 2032, which is likely going to be how long the next TV deal for NASCAR's Truck and NASCAR Cup Series is likely going to also be. This is really, really huge, and what's really cool about this is the fact that this is probably going to be the main thing that's going to be broadcast. One of the issues we've had with like the Xfinity Series in the past, especially when it's on ESPN, was that would get moved to a different network for like college football. The fact that this is going to be the main focus for their network, I think is really, really huge. And what's really cool about the CW is the fact that the CW gets like 100 million households, which means this is going to be on broadcast television for every single race. And what's also cool about this is everything is going to be free on the app as well. I don't know who the on-air talent is going to be. I really hope they get Alan Bessick, because Alan Bessick, in my opinion, is one of the greatest commentators ever. It would be really awesome and cool to see him have the opportunity and chance to call Xfinity Series races once again. Maybe in the future, the Cup Series could come to CW as well, but obviously NBC and Fox are likely going to return. Nonetheless, I think this is really, really exciting and really, really cool. And I'm glad to see that the CW at least is really committed to the future of the Xfinity Series. I really hope it's successful long term. Nonetheless, I think it's really awesome and cool to see the CW is really going to be committed. I think this is huge for the Xfinity Series. And I think it'll be very successful for the Xfinity Series as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about electric cars. Now, this is mentioned during the State of Sport Address video that I did on Saturday. But according to what was reported by Adam Stern and KickingTheTires.net's Jerry Jordan, Adam Stern also reported on this as well, Steve O'Donnell is heading to Japan next week to study hydrogen racing and talk to retrospective OEMs, not just about electric racing, but also potentially bring new OEMs into the sport. This has been a major conversation for a very, very long time, and this doesn't surprise or shock me. It was also noted in that same article that they actually are going to be testing an electric race car, I believe on December or January at Martinsville, and it will be on display throughout the 2024 season. Now, one thing that people do need to remember, they are not going to be running this car right away. We are many years away from an electric car being raced. One of the reasons why this is being done, though, is for the long-term future. And there's been some talk and conversations about having an exhibition series. They had talked about doing it in 2023 and even in 2024 displaying it, but they never went through. I do think there's a chance that there could be an exhibition series in 2024, maybe even 2025. But I think as of right now, that is not going to end up taking place, unfortunately. But again, they basically with manufacturers stuff, they bring this up in the press conference as well. Manufacturers are focusing quite a bit on electric cars. So this doesn't surprise or shock me, unfortunately, that this is being considered. Do I want everything going fully electric? No. But if manufacturers continue this, unfortunately, this is the way things are going to end up going. It is disappointing for sure, but not a surprise on that end. That being said, it doesn't surprise me that they're talking about this. Electric race cars are maybe something that will continue going into the future, but as of right now, it's not going to be the main thing, so keep that in mind. They haven't officially gone, they're not going to that at this point. They're just doing this for the future. So we'll see what happens long term, but nonetheless, it's interesting to see that electric race cars are being talked about, and they are going to be testing an electric race car. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dana White. Now, it was reported by Adam Stewart in multiple different reports that according to him, and he put this out, I believe, on Saturday as well, that Dana White and former UFC chairman Lorenzo Fertitta are at Phoenix where Wall says he's meeting with NASCAR executives to discuss potential collabs with Nitrocross and other Trail 1 properties. Thrill Run is owned by Dana White, and Dana White, of course, is the current president of the UFC. So it's really interesting to see that Dana White is talking to NASCAR about maybe doing some stuff with Thrill 1. And I think it is cool to see that Dana White is moving around the sport. And it shows that NASCAR is getting some interest from UFC partners. And it is interesting to see that Thrill 1 is also getting involved as well. This could also be a big reason and holdup for media negotiations. I don't think Dana White has any advances when it comes to Amazon, but I don't know if Thrill 1 is a major company or has a big enough company to go to some sort of streaming service, because a lot of talk about NASCAR maybe going to streaming in the next TV deal, which has been a major topic and major point of conversation in recent years. But again, it is interesting to hear that Dana White is getting involved quite a bit. But I would be really cool to see maybe some NASCAR drivers involved. Maybe he's involved with the Netflix documentary as well. Obviously, NASCAR has that Netflix documentary, which is coming out next year. I wouldn't be completely shocked or surprised if Dana White is at least involved in some sort of capacity with that, considering we do have some UFC events that do go on that platform, and executives do go on that platform as well. Nonetheless, I do find it interesting and kind of convenient that Dana White is there, especially with the Netflix documentary going on. It wouldn't surprise or shock me if Dana White is involved, especially with that. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Hill. Now, Austin Hill was being interviewed by FrontStretch.com, and Austin Hill went on FrontStretch's interview, and he continued to call out Sheldon Creed after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Phoenix. Basically says, showing how you're supposed to race a teammate, and talks about respect as well. If you've been paying attention over the last week or so, and you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Martinsville about a week or two ago, you saw what happened between Sheldon Creed and Austin Hill. On the final restart of the race with 2 laps to go after a 30-minute red flag, there was contact between both Austin Hill and Sheldon Creed. First, Austin Hill moved Sheldon Creed up the racetrack, and Sheldon Creed lost a lot of ground down the backstretch. Then he had Sheldon Creed run in the back of Austin Hill, move them up. Then he did the same thing on the white flag, moved them up. Then basically Austin Hill and him were bumping and banging, moving each other around, and Austin Hill completely runs into the back of Sheldon Creed, and he was really frustrated and upset. You had Andy Petrie really upset with Sheldon Creed as well, but Andy Petrie did later in the week on Thursday, and we talked about this on Friday as well, Andy Petrie did come out and apologize to Sheldon Creed for the way that he acted, especially after there was some damage there. Austin Hill, in my opinion, is kind of acting a little bit ridiculous in this situation. And let me explain. The fact he's still going on about this is kind of childish in my opinion. Sheldon Creed did nothing wrong. I don't know why Austin Hill is so upset and frustrated still with Sheldon Creed. Now, Sheldon Creed did get interviewed by NASCAR and NBC. I think it might have been Kim McCoon, I think it was, who interviewed Sheldon Creed, or might have been Dave Burns. And he kind of said that him and Austin have not talked about the situation. And what's really childish all about the situation, too, throughout this whole thing, was basically the fact that Austin Hill revealed that Sheldon Creed's going to go to Joe Gibbs Racing, which is likely going to be announced in the coming weeks. Again, that's another childish thing that you do not do in any given situation. And the fact that Austin Hill is still going on about how racing a teammate, which, by the way, Austin Hill, you're the one who started it by running Sheldon Creed up the racetrack, dude, and he paid you back, and you're going for the win. I don't think you really did anything wrong, but he sure as hell didn't do anything wrong, so I really don't understand why Austin Hill is still frustrated and upset when Sheldon Creed, when, like I said, in my opinion, Sheldon Creed did nothing wrong. He's going for the win, his first career win. He can't just let you win the damn race. You got to also let him have an opportunity to win the race as well. And the fact that you're still upset and mad and frustrated at Sheldon Creed doesn't make any sense. Luckily, you're not going to be teammates next year, so you don't have to worry about this BS, because now you can focus on Jesse Love, which, by the way, Jesse Love caused one of the wrecks in the Truck Series race, but we're not going to talk about that. Austin Hill, apparently, because he says, I can't wait to work with Jesse Love. Well, Jesse Love has kind of been a dirty driver in the past, so I don't know where he's getting that stuff from. But at this particular point, it doesn't surprise or shock me to see that Austin Hill's upset. But again, I don't know why he's still mad and upset. He needs to calm down a little bit, and he needs to focus on the bigger picture going forward in 2024, because they're not going to be teammates next year in 2024, and needs to move on from that. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Blaney versus Ross Chastain. Now, during the NASCAR Cup Series Championship race, we did see Ryan Blaney pick up the championship win. And by the way, he did pass post-race inspection. But throughout the race, and near the end with about 40-50 laps to go, you started seeing some battle between Ross Chastain and Ryan Blaney, who in my opinion are probably the two fastest cars in this race. Ryan Blaney, of course, being the championship leader, and Ross Chastain, who just overall had the fastest car. And we saw these guys put on a really good show and a really good battle for about 20 or 30 laps. And throughout this, you saw Ryan Blaney getting really upset. He flipped Ross Chastain off, and he was not very happy with Ross Chastain with the way he was raced. After the race concluded, and by the way, Ross Chastain did go on to win the race and pick up a second win in 2023, which is the first time, by the way, that a driver has won, the driver that's not been the championship for has won the race, the final race of the year, since we started this format back in 2014. The first driver to do that since 2013 when Denny Hamlin won at Homestead. Ross Chastain was interviewed by the media, and he says that he doesn't care if Blaney is mad at him. He's going for a win. He says he didn't care then, and he doesn't care now with the way they raced Ryan Blaney. He said he wasn't going to wreck Ryan Blaney to defect the championship, but he was not going to let Ryan Blaney by, and he didn't care. Well, a few hours after, in the media center, which about 2 hours ago as a matter of fact, Ryan Blaney was interviewed and basically asked that question by Jenna Fryer, and Ryan Blaney says he hit Chastain absolutely on purpose, with the media center basically laughing at Ryan Blaney's comment, which I thought was a really, really funny comment. Yeah, I hit him on purpose. He basically slammed the door on me 10 times. So I basically got into the back of him, kind of did that on Mark Truex Jr. as well. Look, I understand that a lot of fans were mad at Ross Chastain, especially Ryan Blaney fans were upset with Ross Chastain, and I get it and understand. Because Ryan Blaney, you don't want Ross Chastain slowing down. The reason that Ryan Blaney was upset with Chastain is because of the fact he had Kyle Larson and William Byron catching, which is kind of understandable and acceptable. But Ross Chastain, just like Ryan Blaney, he's trying to go out and win the race for his partners and for his sponsors. And he wants to have a lot of momentum going into 2024. Ross Chastain has not had the best year in 2023. Yes, he has scored 2 victories. He's had a good year on that front in that aspect. But Ross Chastain is looking to have end the year off on a much better note. And I don't think he really cares what Ryan Blaney is thinking in that situation. His focus is to win for his partners and win the championship. Normally, you don't have these guys racing the championship contenders hard, but in this situation, I don't blame Ross Chastain for racing him hard. I don't think Ross did anything wrong, and I think this is the old Ross's back where he doesn't care, and I absolutely respect it, and I don't disagree with how the way Ross raced Ryan. He didn't wreck him, he raced him fair and square, and in my opinion, it created a pretty awesome and a pretty good championship battle, in my honest opinion. I thought it was really fun and really interesting and a great ending to that. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about AJ Allmendinger. Now, AJ Allmendinger was asked once again about his 2024 plans, and he kind of spoke on that. And he continued on by saying that he will do what Matt and Chris asked. Matt Call and Chris Rice are basically the two higher-ups at Kaulig Racing. Now, AJ Allmendinger has still not made the decision on what he is going to be doing for 2024. Now, we do know that AJ Allmendinger is, of course, going to be returning to Kaulig Racing in the 2024 season. But the big question going on right now is, will AJ Allmendinger be returning to the NASCAR Cup Series in the number 16 car, or is he moving back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024? There has been a lot of talk and speculation behind the scenes that AJ Allmendinger is going to move back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series on a full-time basis in 2024 and most likely go over to that 16 car next year. The reason being is because it was announced about 2 weeks ago that Chandler Smith will not be returning to Kaulig Racing in 2024. So that is likely where AJ Allmendinger is going to go. Now, AJ will at least for sure make some select NASCAR Cup Series starts with Kaulig Racing next year, but it will likely be in the 13 car instead of the 16 car. So who is going to take over the 16 car in the Cup Series in 2024? Well, there's been a lot of chatter and speculation that the driver will take over that car next year is Ty Dillon. Ty Dillon is no longer driving for Spire Motorsports after tonight's NASCAR Cup Series race, and he, of course, does not have a ride for 2024. There have been some speculation he may go to RCR next year, but that's off the table with Jesse Love going into the 2 car. Like I said, there's a lot of speculation and chatter that he is going to go to the 16 Cup car because he does have sponsorship and funding. Now, personally, I would like to rather see AJ Allmendinger continuing driving the 16 car next year, but I think when you look at it, it makes sense when it comes to funding and sponsorship. And unfortunately, AJ Allmendinger, compared to Ty Dillon, he doesn't have the best funding and sponsorship currently at the moment right now. So that doesn't surprise or shock me. But with AJ Allmendinger returning to the Xfinity Series, more likely, who are going to be his teammates? Well, there's a lot of potential possibilities when it comes to teammates. You have Lane Riggs. Lane Riggs has not announced anything for 2024 at the moment, but there's been some talk that he could go full-time next year with Kaulig. Derek Cross is another name that I mentioned. He's been driving quite a few races for Kaulig, and some speculate he may be in a Kaulig ride next year. What about Matt DiBenedetto? Matt DiBenedetto has not announced anything for the 2024 season currently at the moment, and some believe he's working on something for 2024. So I could certainly see Matt DiBenedetto getting a chance and opportunity at this point. But like I said, I do believe that AJ Allmendinger is going to return to the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year, which I think he's going to have a lot more fun racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series than he has in the NASCAR Cup Series. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to that, but it does sound like right now, currently at the moment, that AJ Allmendinger is probably going to be returning to the Xfinity Series. We'll have to wait and see what happens, though, when it comes to that announcement, but I think he will be back in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fox Sports. This is kind of something we talked about with the State of Sport address, but it comes with the TV deals. But before the State of Sport address happened, we had a report, I think, from Landon Murdoch, or I think it was from Cindy Enner, multiple different reporters, including Adam Stern. And according to Adam Stern, it says we're currently in, I think, the final status of a very constructive negotiation for our NASCAR renewal. We look forward to continuing that partnership in NASCAR. NASCAR exceeds our expectations from a return on investment point of view. Fox Sports been with NASCAR since the 2001 season, I should say, and they are expected to return in the next TV deal. Now, obviously, NASCAR and Fox compared to NASCAR and NBC, we all notice at this point, NASCAR and Fox's coverage is very, very bad. And I think a perfect example was the Truck Series race this past week. First of all, the broadcast was not at the track. Talking about the broadcasters were basically in the Charlotte studio instead of at the racetrack for the championship race. And they can say what they want about the return on investment. I get that they probably do truly get a return on investment. But here's my problem with the truck broadcast. I think the truck broadcast was very bad overall. There was just a lot of bugs with it. There was a lot of issues with the broadcast and just a lot of unacceptable things that came out of the Fox broadcast that need to change going forward in the next TV deal. And I'm really hoping when it comes to next TV deal that all these broadcasts do end up being a lot better, not just from Fox's sake, but NBC's sake. They are going to get Kevin Harvick next year, which I think is really, really good for Fox's broadcast next year. But overall, I just think the broadcasts have been so disappointing and really jarring this year. I really hope things do get better next year for the broadcast. It does sound like Fox is going to return, which I think at least in some instances is good. But in my honest opinion, it's not a very, very good look to Fox coming back. But they absolutely for sure do need to have a better broadcast for 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Frankie Munoz. There's been a lot of talk and speculation about what Frankie Munoz could be doing for 2024. Well, there was a report that came out on Saturday, middle of the afternoon from Front Stretch and Jared Haas that they've been told by sources that Frankie Munoz will be going to RSS Racing in the 2024 season. And that's an announcement will be coming in the next few weeks. However, about 20-30 minutes after that got reported, RSS Racing's account basically denied the announcement, saying that we've only announced that Ryan Sieg is going to be returning to the 39 car in 2024. Then a few hours later, during I think the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, Frankie Munoz commented on the original Front Stretch account, and he said, "News to me." Now, again, there's been a lot of chatter about what Frankie Munoz is going to be doing in 2024, and a lot of people, including myself, have been speculating that he is going to run with RSS Racing in the 2024 season, and that, of course, that he could also be potentially running part-time with ThFT Racing in 2024, potentially in the 13 truck that Hailie Deegan is a part of, so that she'll be moving up to the Xfinity Series next year. Now, obviously, this is something that does happen from time to time. You do have people who do get upset with their announcements being leaked a little bit early. A lot of times, though, you do not have teams that respond to these situations. We saw this with a few weeks ago when Matt Weaver kind of reported that Chandler Smith is likely going to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024, but he did have sources go back to Matt Weaver basically telling him that it hasn't been officially made yet. Now, do I think that Frankie Munoz is going to RSS Racing in 2024? Yes, I do believe that he's going to end up in RSS Racing in the 2024 season. And I think it will be the next 2 weeks. Again, I don't know when exactly it will be announced, but again, I think he ends up there in the 2024 year. I think things were maybe jumped a little bit by Front Stretch, but also I don't think Front Stretch is lying. I think the sources that told him are probably telling the truth. He's been kind of rumored for the last 2 weeks he's going to go to RSS. That private porno account also kind of retweeted that same tweet. So I think it's true that he's going to end up at RSS Racing in 2024, but I think that announcement will have to wait a few more weeks. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. It does sound like Frankie does have a home for 2024. When it does get finalized and officially confirmed, we'll talk about it here on the channel, but it sounds like he may be headed over to RSS Racing in 2024, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the charter agreement. Now, there was an interesting update that came out in regards to the charter agreement. According to Adam Stern, NASCAR attempted to assuage concerns over its charter offer to teams last week in a team owner council meeting, and some teams came away from it encouraged. It then was reported a little bit later, however, that they are unlikely to finalize a new charter agreement until a new TV deal strikes. NASCAR has, of course, finally got the schedule out, but the next thing they need to get done is the TV deal and the charter agreement. Those are the next two big things. Remember, the charter agreement is expected to expire, I believe, at the end of this year, and they have to have the charter agreement done by the start of 2024. Now, there is some good news, at least the fact that they are getting a little bit closer to having that charter agreement done. Obviously, the TV deal still needs to be officially done for the Cup Series, though, before that does get officially finalized. Now, when do I think it'll be done and what networks are going to be added for the TV deal? Speculation right now is that Fox and NBC, they are going to return in the next TV deal. But there's also a lot of talk about what's going to be during that summer package, and many people have been speculating and believe that Amazon is going to get the rights to that summer package for 2024. For the 6-7 race package, maybe have some of the NBC and Fox group kind of come together in that essence. And one of the reasons there is like during the summer break, especially if the Olympics do come on into the next TV deal in 2028, you could have Amazon being around and NASCAR doesn't have to stop their season early. Obviously, one of the biggest reasons why they're talking to Amazon is because streaming is becoming extremely prevalent here over the course of the last few years. And it is going to continue to get more prevalent, especially when we get to 2025. As for the charter agreement, look, you all know my opinions on the charter agreement. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I think the charter agreement does need to get finalized, especially with teams spending $30 to $40 million for these charters, and that number continues to skyrocket, though I do think there needs to be a cap on how expensive charters do end up coming. The teams want it permanent, and I completely understand it. I understand that NASCAR doesn't want to completely make it permanent, but I understand where the teams are coming from, especially when it does come to these charters agreements and these charter deals. They want it permanent because that means more money for the teams, and they're also expected when it comes to the next TV deal to get a little bit more of that piece of pie. Currently, I think the teams get 25% of that TV revenue. They're hoping that the tracks get less, and the teams do end up getting more, which I think does make a lot of sense in the long run. It is going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to that, and we'll see what happens with the future of this TV deal negotiations. It sounds like we're getting closer. There's some concerns as well, but it sounds like there might at least be some hope for the future when it comes to the next TV deal in negotiations for that. It'll be very interesting to see what happens in regards to when it comes to that. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday, middle of the afternoon. Now that the Circuit Gilles, Villeneuve, and Montreal missed out on hosting a NASCAR race weekend in 2024, NASCAR is reassessing a range of options that it has for 2025. So it's not sure thing that Montreal will feature on the 2025 calendar. Now, it came out during the State of Sport address that Iowa Speedway, which of course is going on to the NASCAR Cup Series schedule for 2024, is not a placeholder for Montreal. NASCAR had apparently been in top negotiations to go to Circuit Gilles, Villeneuve, and Montreal for 2024. However, due to F1 moving their Canadian Grand Prix to a little bit earlier in the year, usually the race is in July or basically in August, they moved that race to the weekend that I believe they were wanting to have the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve weekend, which of course was on the weekend that I think Iowa is going to be taking place, which of course will be the first NBC weekend in 2024. NASCAR, is no secret, does want to go international into the future. And a lot of fans, including myself, were told we were likely going to be going there in 2024. And it would have been a huge step for the sport, being last race on the FS1 calendar, the Fox calendars, was likely going to end up happening because NASCAR, like I said, does want to go international in the near future. Now, if they don't go to Montreal in 2025, they still want to go international. And I think there's one perfect track they could go to, and that's the Autodromo Hernando Rodriguez track, which of course is where the Mexican Grand Prix takes place at currently at the moment. This track actually used to host NASCAR races from 2005 through the 2008 season. And I think the racing would be very, very good. The next gen car, I think, will extremely excel. The Xfinity Series put on a very, very good show there. You also do have Canadian Tire Motorsports Park that is available if you want to go to Canada next year, or in 2025 for that matter. You have Canadian Tire Motorsports Park that's available. That track put on a lot of good racing in the Truck Series, and I think it would excel very well. But personally, I want Montreal to get on the schedule in 2025. The Xfinity Series always put on an amazing and a fantastic product. And I think if we go back there in 2025, I think the product is going to even be majorly better. So I really hope they can find a way to get this on the schedule in 2025. If they can't go there in 2025 and go international, and that would also kind of be a street race, whilst I think Montreal is technically a street course track, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it needs to come on the schedule in 2025. Does it come on a schedule? I'm not really sure at this point, but I think the track will put on really good racing, especially with the next-gen car. Now, of course, the road course racing product does need to get better with the next-gen car, but I do believe that it can get better if NASCAR can work on it. So we'll see what happens in regards to the future Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, but personally, like I said, I really want to see Circuit Gilles Villeneuve on the schedule in 2024. We'll wait to see what happens, and hopefully the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, in fact, will get on the schedule in 2025, but I don't know if it's going to be at this perfect point. So we'll see what happens in regards to that. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Carson Hocevar versus Corey Heim. Now, if you watch the Craftsman Truck Series race, the season finale Truck Series race to determine a champion, you saw the disaster that ended up taking place. And a lot of it started because of what happened between Carson Hocevar and Corey Heim. So both those guys were the two drivers who were leading the championship at the time. Corey had actually gotten by Carson for the championship lead. With, I think, 28 or 29 laps to go, Carson Hocevar completely overshoots the corner and runs into Corey Heim and spins him out, and it collects Stewart Friesen. Stewart Friesen would show his displeasure on pit road to Carson Hocevar, and you saw the visible reaction of how upset Carson Hocevar was. Now, many people in the industry believe that Carson Hocevar was putting on an act, but I actually think that Carson Hocevar felt like crap for basically running into Corey Heim right there. I don't think he meant to intentionally get in him. I think he meant to get into him, but I don't think he meant to get back at him. And then Corey Heim was on his radio chatter and speaking to his crew, and he says that he is not going to leave this track without basically being wrecked. Well, with 3 or 4 laps to go, Grant Enfinger and Ben Rhodes take on lead. By the way, at this point, Carson Hocevar dropped way back, but you had Corey Heim, who did have a ton of damage. He was moving back through the field. However, with 3 laps to go, you had Grant Enfinger and Ben Rhodes, who were up front leading the championship fight. And Ben Rhodes was trying to run him down and unfortunately was losing ground. But with 3 or 4 laps to go, Corey Heim would get his retaliation. He would end up putting Carson Hocevar into the outside wall, and that would bring out a caution with 3 laps to go in the race. It would affect the championship because Taylor Gray also got caught up in the wreck as well. Now, Carson Hocevar was mad at himself for the wreck, and he actually, like I said, took responsibility and apologized profusely, not just to the media, but also to himself, saying, I was in the wrong. I affected and I screwed over and I robbed Corey Heim of a championship. Now, Corey Heim would go on and basically did not admit, he says it did not retaliate against Carson Hocevar. A lot of people were mad at Corey Heim for not admitting that he retaliated, but you do have to remember earlier this year, especially at this track, when Denny Hamlin would admit that he intentionally wrecked Ross Chastain into the outside wall, and he got a 25-point penalty and a $25,000 or $50,000 fine for admitting on his podcast that he did intentionally wreck Ross Chastain. So we do all have to remember that he did end up doing that. As for what happened there, I think what Carson Hocevar did was really, really bad, especially for Carson Hocevar. And I think Carson, throughout the year until that race, had shown a lot of maturity as a race car driver and had shown he can do it. He has gotten 4 wins this year and had proven himself, and he's done good in the Select Cup Series races. But one of the big issues with Carson Hocevar is he still has a lot of learning and growing up to do as a driver. But he is only 20 years old, so we do have to keep that in mind. He is still a relatively young driver. So I think he made a dumb mistake 100%, but it was a bad move on his part. What Corey Heim did, in my opinion, was worse. Retaliating and affecting the outcome of the championship. I get Corey Heim being upset about it. I get him really being upset about what happened. But you don't affect the outcome of the championship because you're upset with him. If you want to fight him after the race, that's one thing. If you want to retaliate, that's perfectly fine. But don't affect your teammate especially who got involved in the wreck, and don't affect the outcome of the championship because you're upset with Carson Hocevar. Again, he didn't even sound apologetic after it. In my opinion, Corey Heim should have been the bigger man in the situation. I get being upset, and I thought it maybe at least a little fair, but don't affect the outcome of the championship because you didn't just end up affecting Carson Hocevar's night, you end up affecting your night as well because you got involved in the wreck, and you also end up affecting the outcome of the championship that caused a lot of the chaos that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Corey Heim has a lot of growing up to do. He's going to be in the Truck Series next year as well. I think what he did was also unacceptable by retaliating and affecting the outcome of the championship. Like I said, I 100% get Corey Heim being upset and frustrated with what happened, but you don't affect the outcome of the championship, in my honest opinion. I think it was bad what he did. I think it was almost worse than what Carson did, in my opinion. And I think he completely overreacted to this situation. Both these guys got a lot of growing up to do next. And I think Carson Hocevar, though, has a huge rude awakening. You had Tyler Reddick, and we're going to talk about some of the reactions from a lot of drivers in the social media from the Truck Series race here in just a second. Nonetheless, in my opinion, both were in the wrong for the way they acted. And I'm not surprised or shocked that a lot of drivers were upset with them, how the championship was affected. Grant Enfinger was also really upset as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about the Truck Championship race as a whole. We already talked about the Corey Heim and Carson Hocevar stuff, but we're going to talk about the aftermath and the frustration from the Truck Series race. First, Grant Enfinger was the first one to respond to the situation, saying that we all acted like idiots out on the racetrack and we all completely looked unprofessional out on the racetrack. But you had a lot of drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series and in the industry that were reacting on social media. First, you had Tyler Reddick going on and saying to Carson Hocevar, this dumbass will never learn. You had Chris Buescher, who said the very major lack of sportsmanship. You had Denny Hamlin, who responded to the situation in the race and basically said, this is what happens when you create a series with no rules and no boundaries. You had a ton of reaction. Josh Berry saying very disappointed. A lot of drivers reacted on social media to the situation in the race. Well, after that, on Saturday, a lot of drivers would go and react and spoke to the media. You have Mark Truex Jr. calling the race an embarrassment, and he would say that Carson Hocevar put on an act. You had Chris Buescher responding and saying that that was also an embarrassment as well, and not the way we raced, especially with this being a top-tier series. That was unprofessional the way the drivers had acted. Kyle Busch, who of course at the time was an owner in the Truck Series, says there needs to be some new rules that are implemented in the Truck Series going forward. Otherwise, you're going to continue to have things like this happen in the Truck Series. And it also says that this is what happens when you have these kids who are 8, 10 years old taught like this, and this is what you get when you get to the Truck Series. And also says their lack of respect has kind of gone into the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series as well. Denny Hamlin says that there needs to be some new rules as well, and there need to be penalties. And one of the things he suggests, and I actually agree with him on this, is that we should basically penalize them by forcing these drivers to go to the back of the field if they cause a wreck, especially if they're on the lead lap. I completely agree with that. But Tony Stewart, with the cherry on top on Saturday, after winning the NASCAR Xfinity Series Championship as an owner, Tony Stewart says and called out the Truck Series, saying that the Xfinity Series race really, really well. And he says, we didn't evolve into the Truck Series the way they race. We didn't evolve in the Truck Series. And you don't need to act like that to decide a championship. Tony Stewart is absolutely right, by the way. And I 100% agree with the drivers on the way that race went. That was one of the most unprofessional and classless races I have seen as a racing fan in a very long time. I've made 2 videos talking about the Truck Series race. Because, in my opinion, that was not only one of the worst displays of racing I've ever seen, but it was one of the worst NASCAR races I've ever seen as a fan. We crown champions in the sport, and there's a lot of things that need to be done. I agree with Denny Hamlin. There needs to be penalties for these drivers coming up. One thing I would like to see going forward is the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, they no longer have a playoffs. Because, in my opinion, I don't think they can handle it. Or just the Truck Series doesn't have a playoffs going forward, because I don't think these young kids can handle it. One of the biggest problems right now with the Truck Series is you have a lot of young kids who are racing for the championship. Keep this in mind. You had Heim and Carson Hocevar, who are 20 and 21 years old. They should not be having the pressure put on themselves because of the mental toughness. I think that's one thing that does need to change is that. And again, I agree with Tony Stewart. The Xfinity Series had a much better championship, and he had a lot more older veterans who were in that championship for. Cole Custer, who is 26 or 27, or 25, I should say. John Hunter is 27 years old. He's going to be a Cup Series driver next year. Remember, John Hunter and Cole Custer were Cup drivers in the past. Justin Allgaier, who was in his mid-30s. And then Sam Mayer, who was a young 20-year-old, but he's learned and matured a lot as a driver over the course of the last few years. There need to be some changes going forward for the Truck Series. That was one of the worst displays of races I've ever seen. And I know Michael Waltrip was kind of defending it, kind of calling out the Xfinity Series, but man, Michael, you completely did not watch race, especially since you guys weren't even at the racetrack. I think it was one of the worst displays of races I've ever seen as a fan, and things need to change. I agree with Tony Stewart. There needs to be changes with the Truck Series. This has been a problem for a long time. I feel like the Truck Series has evolved completely in chaos over the last few years, and there needs to be major changes going into the Truck Series in the future, and the way the race displayed was completely uncalled for and terrible, in my honest opinion. So, that is going to today's NASCAR news video. A really long video, I should say. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Links go below that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about all the stuff we discussed on the channel, including what Tony Stewart's comments, the Heim and Carson Hocevar beef, and all their stuff we discussed today on the channel? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel is more likely going to be a NASCAR silly season update on the channel. Wednesday, there might be a NASCAR news video on the channel. If there's any major news that breaks, we'll talk about it here. There's also some big end-of-year videos that are going to also be out on the channel throughout this week. We got a lot of other content dropping on the channel as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.